And we are live for our latest edition of Nick Valencia Live. Wow, I'd love to see that. There's already 10 people waiting in the waiting room, waiting for us to get started here. Hey, everybody, welcome in. Carlos, Serena, Mike, Rachel, Arlen, Margaret, thank you. Piper, for joining, all of you guys. Thank you so much for the anticipation here. This makes me feel great that there was people already waiting in the waiting room. I'll give it just a beat here before we get started, but we're also joined, I see already one of our guests later this hour, Barney Santos. We're going to be celebrating the start of Hispanic Heritage Month by putting a spotlight on small business owners, Latino small business owners. That's going to be one of the conversations we have later today. We'll just pause a little bit here. Soul Rose, Nancy. God, I love that you guys are in and ready to go. Usually it takes a little while before viewers show up, but I know the longer that we stay live, the more viewers that we get, which is amazing. So welcome to the show. This is the latest edition of Nick Valencia Live. I'm the host, Nick Valencia, an independent journalist. And for those who are just joining the program, maybe just becoming familiar with who we are and what we do, I am a former CNN correspondent. I was there at the company 19 years before leaving earlier this summer. So on June 1st, 2025, we stepped out on our own, and it was on June 12th that we launched this Substack. In the spirit of really sort of the new media landscape and the changing media landscape, we have really tried to meet the moment here at Nick Valencia News. It is a small team, and together we have focused primarily on immigration. So our past reporting has taken us everywhere from the Central Valley in California, spending the day with grape pickers, where they tell us that they made $16.50 an hour and worked in triple-digit temperatures. It was there that we introduced you to, a kid, basically, a varsity football player that picked grapes in the morning, and then he went and practiced varsity football in the early evening, late afternoon. And then we went down to Tijuana and spent time with a deported U.S. veteran there to focus on combat military veterans who had been victims of the immigration system, whether they had allowed their legal status to lapse or they had some sort of criminal problem. It affected them, and they ended up in Mexico. And there's hundreds, if not thousands, of similar stories like that. And then that took us our reporting to Utah. And I want to start this show here with a sad update about one of the stories that we brought to you out of Utah. You remember the story of a family that was persecuted by cartels in Mexico and also hunted by the same ICE agent here in the United States. Well, that family, first, it was the son who was picked up on his way to work in an early morning, and then he was detained. While he was being taken into custody, 2 weeks later, the agent told him that he was going after the dad. She was going after the dad. 2 weeks later, the father was detained. And it was during that incident that the agent said to the mother, "You're next." You remember we brought you that story and interviewed the mother in an undisclosed location in a park in Salt Lake City, Utah. Well, it was last week that, gosh, it's so hard to even say. It was last week that I was informed that the mother was also picked up by ICE. I've not verified just yet whether or not it was the same ICE agent who kept true on her promise that she was coming after the mother next. But a very sad update from the story that we brought to you about an ICE agent going after one family. First the son, the father, and now the mother. The result of this is that a 17-year-old in the family, who is a U.S. citizen, an American-born child, is now in sort of legal limbo with their custody. This child, 17 years old, not yet an adult, still a minor, is staying right now with their parents, with relatives in Utah. And Brandon, whose voice you heard in a recorded detention center from Henderson, Nevada. You remember that story that we brought to you. It went viral. He's trying desperately to get out of custody. The problem is that his father's also in custody. Brandon has hope because his petition went through before the executive order that denied bond hearings for those in custody right now. His father, though, is deteriorating very quickly, mentally and emotionally, and he is considering self-deporting. Now, if his father self-deports, then that virtually means Brandon's claim goes out the window. His asylum claim comes no more. So that's the status of the story that we brought to you. The son taken by ICE, the father taken by ICE, and now the mother, just a month or so after we brought to you that story out of Salt Lake City, The mother is now in ICE custody, and the 17-year-old son, American citizen, American born, is now caught up in this legal system of what to do next. So that's the update I have to share with you. It's a really heavy one. It's a sad one. We're going to continue to track the story and bring you the updates. I reached out to the 17-year-old who said he was busy. He is as doing his best as you would consider, that you would think that he'd be doing right now. Both his parents in custody, his older brother in custody. The family business is sort of on the brink of collapsing if no one can come back and take care of it. That's why Brandon wants so desperately to get out of custody and hopes that his asylum claim is given. It's really, really heavy, man. So these are the kinds of stories that are important, though, to tell. This is why our news organization, Nick Valencia News, is out in the streets bringing you these stories and trying to highlight the injustices that are going on in our immigration system. And that brings us to today. That brings us to our guest today. Mike Hoffman is somebody who I met last week. We actually haven't even met in person, but I met him because of my travels to South Florida, which is actually now 2 weeks ago. Went down to South Florida with my executive producer, and we told stories about some of the reports that we brought to you out of Alligator Alcatraz. And it was during our visit outside of this infamous facility that we met an activist who told us about a family who had been caught up in this disastrous immigration system. Remember, the administration right now isn't playing by the rules. And what was once, quote unquote, normal in the immigration system is no longer. So even access to deportation officers, access to immigration attorneys, visits from immigration attorneys or family members, all of that at a place like Alligator Alcatraz is off limits. And we heard about this family, this man named Carlos, who is from Pennsylvania, who we'll hear about more this hour. And his family is fighting, along with Mike, who's a family friend, to try to get him out of this system that he's been caught up in. And we wanted to bring you his story today, something that you've heard about already. We brought you a little bit about Carlos's case. We didn't name him. We got the approval of his family to finally name him today. This is a man who spent 30 plus years in the country, has been a good faith contributor to this country, and is now caught up in this legal system, this immigration system. And Mike Hoffman joins us now. Mike, you are somebody who I think speaks with a level of authority. You're a former U.S. Marine, a combat veteran, and now you are a friend of somebody who's being held in what is sort of like a black style site immigration facility. Tell us sort of, if you want to introduce yourself and just sort of introduce us to the viewers here, introduce yourself to the viewers, and also tell us about the challenges that you have faced in trying to get your friend basic human rights that he's guaranteed or should be.
Right, absolutely. Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me. As you said, I'm a former Marine, also combat veteran who is friends just through marriage, really, with somebody who has become detained. I've known him for a very long time. He himself has been here for almost 30 years. Came over when he was 20 years old to escape violence and narcotics in Mexico, where he was, and the lack of opportunity there.
Mhm.
And I heard your story when you first opened up, and I mean, such a sad story. And you've said it before in prior postings, like that is the point. That is 100% the point, to strike that fear into everybody's hearts and minds, to discourage people from coming over here, people from living their lives.
I mean, we saw this in Trump 1.0 in the first iteration of his presidency. I covered family separation, and that policy was basically sanctioned from the top down. It's let's make this so traumatic for the families coming across that we're going to separate them. And yes, families get separated all the time. The discretion still exists of the Border Patrol agent. If they suspect the adult is not kin to the kid that they're bringing across, they end up getting separated. But the Trump administration made it a policy of almost cruelty, right? And now in Trump 2.0, we're seeing that cruelty expand. We're seeing that lack of compassion, that lack of empathy become sort of rule of law. So on that point, talk to me about, your friend and sort of the experiences that they've had within the system since being detained.
Right. So Carlos was detained while traveling with his family. He was initially facing a illegal reentry charge, which would be a felony. He, on his own dime and on his own accord, he traveled back to where he was initially arrested to stand trial, to be judged, as any citizen would be expected to do. And that judgment was not guilty. Unfortunately, an ICE agent was waiting after that non-guilty. When his family and he were celebrating that victory, and truly a victory, he was immediately detained, and he's been in custody ever since. So now we have an individual who's been here for almost 30 years, has a family here, has been working since before 2011, was promoted from production employee to plant manager over the time, has a child who is now attending a Pittsburgh University in biology major. When he first came over here, one of the first things he did was enroll in English as a second language classes. He met his wife there, and just truly, just put down deep roots. So now he's detained, no charges, no criminal charges, no convictions. Just made the mistake of not a mistake, just being here. He's been moved to at least 14 different facilities. Every time he's been moved, there's been no sort of notification of his movement. His wife and a network of friends and activists that she worked diligently to establish has been the sole reason why anybody's known actually where he's at. And we're the exception. Carlos and his wife are the exception. Most don't know. We just had somebody from our local town who actually turns out to be a distant relative of Carlos, our loved one that's detained, who was arrested yesterday or the day before going to work. Nobody.
Let's pause there because,
Sure.
these are the kinds of people that you would think any country would want and welcome. People that are determined to put down roots and build families and marry, locals or American-born people and sort of create another generation of Americans or whatever country they're
Right.
trying to immigrate to, and yet they're being caught and detained on their way to work, right? They're being detained outside of their court hearings. And when they're going and moving in good faith and reporting in the system, they're being detained outside of places where they're trying to get work. That's the part that I don't understand in all of this. And that must be so perplexing to you as an American and as a combat military veteran, for somebody who fought for what the principles of this country stands for, and for it to be wrapped up in this kind of chaos, cruelty as a policy.
Right. That's what we all want, just as humans, right? We want to make it better for the next generation, our kids. That's the goal. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what occupation you have. Everybody wants that. I had it a lot easier than my parents had it, and I'm determined to make it a lot easier for my kids. They'll get farther because of the hard work that I've done, which is a product of the hard work my parents did, which is a product of, it goes on and on. And that's exactly what Carlos did, right? He came here from dire circumstances where he was born and immediately put those roots down. And he just worked tirelessly to build not only a better life for himself and his wife. That's a perk. He ultimately did it to give his son a better life. And now his son is enrolled in a university, as a junior in a university, which Carlos himself never had the opportunity to do as much as he would want to. And so he's going to come out of the gate in the professional world just swinging, just automatically becoming successful. And then in turn, he's going to produce better people someday. And that's the goal of everybody, any society. That's how it works. That's how we progress.
And they're not broken by what they're going through right now, Mike. I worry about the generation of children like Carlos's kids, the wives, the partners, all of the children, mostly the most vulnerable, who have seen their parents caught up in this.
Right.
Talked about, the 17-year-old Dylan, who's out there in Utah right now with both of his parents in custody right now. These are individuals who last year, they told me, according to them, paid $50,000 in taxes. They have a home cleaning service, right? here we have Carlos's kids who are in college right now and have to deal with the trauma of their father in custody, of being shuffled around in this system, 14 different places in the span of what, a month, right? Of 4 weeks.
Right.
I mean, that is crazy to have to expect anyone to deal with this level of trauma.
Well, and it gets crazier too, right? Because the numbers, the people that you're talking about right now, they're the ones that at least have a voice and they can at least rationalize and see
Yeah.
what's going on. We've come across so many detained people with babies, 2 weeks old, toddlers, that there's no choice. At least, Carlos's son, he's in a position, he was born here, he's a citizen, he's going to be able to carry on with his degree and his eventual profession, his love life and all that. The 17-year-old, hopefully, God willing, will be able to do the same. But there's thousands and thousands of children with no voice who will have, and nobody here to take care of them if their parents are deported, which I think is part of the plan. I think that's part of,
Yeah.
we saw in 1.0, the separation of those families, right? Like, you come over here, okay, well, we're going to take your toddlers away from you. Now what? And we lost those kids.
Yeah, I
If
was
you
just going to say
remember,
there's hundreds of families that still have not been reunited. We don't know where some of these children are. Still,
right.
5 years,
And
6
that's
years later.
certainly not the America that I fought for. The arguments, do it legally, right? There's some validity to that, okay? And there's a lot of reasons why. It's a very complicated, a complicated issue that we have. That's why, we've been dealing with immigration complications, and every single country in the world deals with it because it's so complicated. But
For me, it's like, for
what,
me, it's Mike, it's like, do it legally. I get it. I get it. But I also understand just how broken the system is and how
yeah,
complex that statement is. And it's not
yep,
just so simple to do it legally. Where I can get
right.
behind and where I don't want people to get my words twisted, I think everybody wants the murderers gone. Everyone wants the violent criminals gone. Everyone wants the rapists, the pedophiles, the bad actors in our country. We want them gone. I know I certainly want them gone.
Immigrant
Having
or not.
said that, that's not who they're going after. They're going after people like Carlos.
Right. And my point is that what Trump has done and what the administration has done is they've made that two separate issues now. That, you can't talk about immigration and do it legally in the same conversation as you could talk about what's going on now. They've dehumanized, they've taken the humanity out of the conversation. So there are two separately entire conversations now that cannot be discussed at the same at the same conversation, at the same dinner table. I think that's part of the plan. I just want to continue what I was saying about the gentleman that was arrested in Westchester, because we don't know where he's at right now. He's another example who's somebody who's been here for almost 30 years. And the fear is so real that almost immediately he signed a voluntary deportation order, right? So he, under complete duress, he signed his rights away. And even had he not signed his rights away, immigration attorneys in my neck of the woods are just so saturated with cases, nobody can represent him. So
Right.
he truly in just, a horrible position where he can't find representation to protect his own rights. He is too scared to worry about protecting his own rights, and nobody cares. Nobody cares. And,
No one.
and yeah, again, that's part of what's happening right now. And it's blatantly illegal. It's blatantly against our Constitution and what we stand for as Americans.
Well, I think that's the point, like you said, is that let's break you down. Let's get you to lose your hope. Let's get you to lose your faith. This attrition of like maybe dangling a carrot with a habeas corpus hearing, and maybe you're going to be let out, and maybe you get your charges dropped, and then ICE doesn't grant you bond. You get it.
Right. But
You say you want to self-deport, and then all of a sudden a judge says, well, I can't really start your case because the government hasn't processed you at all. They've just been bouncing you around like they have your friend Carlos. That's crazy to me. Can we go back and circle back to that? Because
absolutely.
that's something that we talked about in the report that we put out 2 weeks ago, with you and with his wife as well. I still cannot fathom how many time zones, territories, states, facilities that he was in that small amount of time, and how
Right.
that isn't not wasteful at the very least, if not inhumane.
I made the joke. I made the joke. I deal with pain by humor. I always have. And I made the joke to his wife. Well, like, hey, he's getting that traveling in. That's for sure. And that was in the very beginning when it looked like there was a little bit more hope in the situation. And it didn't seem quite as serious. He'd just been gotten the not guilty. There's been some bumps along the way, but ultimately he's had some success in the very beginning. But now, since he was detained by ICE after his trial, he's not getting those successes, and he's not getting access to his rights. He still hasn't talked to a lawyer and all that. He hasn't had he hasn't had a bond hearing, which we know he's not going to get. He hasn't had his imminent fear hearing yet, which he's entitled to. And that I think is a good segue to why he came over here. I said he came over in 1998. He's from Guerrero. Guerrero is listed on the U.S. State Department's do not travel list because of the narcotics issues and because of the violence. But what Americans don't understand is that violence is in part being committed by government officials. Imagine that. Imagine being in a place where the people that we turn to for help and for hope are
You're terrified
on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, at 20 years old, he was being forced at gunpoint to smuggle drugs. And he realized that he had nowhere to turn but north. So he came here hoping for something, and he did a damn good job of making something of himself. And he is representative of so many immigrants who have the potential and the character to really succeed in this country. And like you said, the immigration system's so broken. These people don't have 10 years to wait for us. They're coming here in genuine fear for their lives. I have a good friend who did come over here the legal way on a work visa from a much, much safer country, from Japan, actually. And the process, she was in a position where she had the safety to wait and do it legally. Everybody wants to do it that way. There's not anybody here who's trying to take advantage of the states or anything like that. They're gonna be killed if they don't come here and do it the way they're doing it. They're gonna be killed.
Yeah, it's just absolutely remarkable that that's not even considered. It doesn't even seem like a good faith effort to consider asylum claims, even though it's part of the bedrock of our country, right? I mean, we
Right.
talked about this outside Alcatraz to supporters of what's going on inside. What other country has the Statue of Liberty? What other country has asylum laws that literally encourages the hungry, the sick, the tired, the poor to come to our country and to
Right.
try to contribute? That to me is this idea of closing the door behind you. This idea that compassion and empathy is a sort of weapon and tool to be used against you. I really am crushed by that. And what hurts me the most throughout all this, Mike, is that I think I was so naive that we really did live in a democracy. But now what I'm starting to realize is that there was this infrastructure always in place for somebody like President Trump to pull the lever. There was this infrastructure in place this whole time for somebody, and he just did it to his supporters, for his supporters. And now we can't even say anything that's with a modicum of criticism or a morsel of sort of criticism as we get further and further into this administration. It's more and more like you cannot say anything negative about what they're doing without fear of repercussion, retaliation, or retribution.
That's important to point out. And, I'm an optimist, right? Democracy is fragile, and those levers have to be in place for democracy to succeed, right? We have to protect the rights of everybody, whether we like what they have to say, whatever we like what they have to do, we have to protect their ability to say it. What is different now is that somebody's actually pulling them. Historically, we stood up and protected those levers from being pulled. Our voice was strong in that nature. We can't, we have to do that again. That's the way to fix this. Hopefully this is a blip in history. Hopefully this is just a bad time in the long history of this country that we can rectify and turn around. I don't know these days. I have my fears for sure, but I still staunchly support democracy. and those levers have to be placed in a democratic government. We're just supposed to be protecting them. So what we can do is we need to stand up and we need to protect those levers again so that we can keep them there for our children. We can keep this democracy for our children. And so that we can invite more people over who are only making us better. I mean, have we forgotten that we are a nation of immigrants? Immigrants haven't forgotten that. They have to take a test to it. They know more about it than we do. So, and that's the thing, we've gotten complacent. We've forgotten how much pain our forefathers have gone through to guarantee this democracy, to ensure it. I haven't forgotten it because I committed to being a part of that. And I can tell you, one of Carlos's biggest dreams was always to fight in the U.S. military. He didn't have the chance because of his illegal status, his illegal status, but he wants to stand up, and we're seeing less and less and less of people who want to stand up and fight for these values that make democracy great. Yeah, I'll get off my soapbox on that for a second.
No, that's why we invited you on, because we love what you had to say. I love my interview with you for our piece. I love your perspective. I love that your lived experience allows you to have these, this discussion that reaches people that I may not be able to because I've never served in the military. Like what you say, I think is stronger and resonates with those that are disillusioned voters, those people that may think that, because it's so black and white right now, it's so simplified. It's like, it really is sport politics, man. So sometimes it's not just the message, it's the messenger. And you have that credibility, I think, in a lot of ways. If you're just joining us now, speaking about that credibility, you're joined by Mike Hoffman. He is a former U.S. Marine, a combat veteran, did 3 tours, I believe, overseas, at least 3 tours overseas. And he is also a friend of somebody who is currently in immigration detention, somebody who was shuffled around 14 different times since the middle of August in the span of 4 weeks, somebody who has been kept from seeing an attorney, has been kept from the basic guarantees under the immigration law system, and who is just basically having to be trafficked, but from one point to the other at the whim of the federal government, who's not being very transparent, not being very forthcoming. And from our reporting, according to sources inside, is basically okay with inhumane treatment, the verbal abuse at the very least, and at worst, we've heard of physical assaults and physical abuse. Mike, while we have you, and we're talking about Alligator Alcatraz and just how just amazingly disastrous of a facility that this is, what sort of stands out to you in the stories that you've heard from Carlos, or the stories now that you've heard from people that you've connected in your network?
Yeah, so I don't have any stories of true abuse or anything like that. And one of the reasons why I don't have any stories like that, I'm sure, is because of the nature of Carlos, right? When we hear from Carlos, he doesn't spend his time talking about the pain he's experiencing like that. He is 100% of the time, he asks how his wife's doing. He asks how's his kids doing. And then he starts to advocate for the detainees that he's with. The ones
What
that
would
don't.
Carlos want us to know? Now speaking on his behalf.
Sure, absolutely. So he wants us to know all the things we've said about how this has come to be, right? How people are getting wrapped up just living their lives. But he also wants people to know, that he wants the family members of those detained to know where their loved ones are and to know that they're at least alive. He wants everybody to know, that it's not just him who's not being given access to legal counsel or to any other rights. There's thousands of them. He wants anybody who's detained to know, don't sign anything unless you know what you're signing. He hopes that everybody has adequate representation. So Carlos and his wife spoke with 35 lawyers before one was willing to take his case. They're just all so busy right now. And he would want you to stay the course. If you're in his position, he would want you to stay the course, stay strong. He has a network of detainees who use their phone calls to call his wife to share words of encouragement. She's become what's that game where you play a whisper down the line, right?
Telephone.
Yeah, telephone, right? Where a detainee will talk to Carlos. Carlos will talk to Angela. Angela will try to get in contact with the family members to spread that hope, right? And one of the things that he would really want people to know about him is that no matter what happens, he recognizes that the United States is responsible for his security and the future that he's gotten that Mexico couldn't give him. To this day,
Yeah.
despite all this, and again, this is why I think it's so important to protect democracy. He still credits the United States, with everything he has, and he knows he doesn't regret his decision ultimately to do that. He has a lot of good to show from that, and we just want it to continue.
Well, we're so grateful that you joined us, Mike. We're so grateful for your time. Is there anything, as we have you, we're going to move on to Barney Santos in a little bit. He's been waiting so patiently for us to highlight his story. Anything that we haven't asked you that you think is important to know? Anything that you'd like to talk about? Now's your chance, man.
Yeah, one thing I got to give a plug. This has been incredibly expensive for Carlos and his wife. 35,000 just in legal fees alone. He's also, or his wife is actually following him around, trying to stay literally as close to him as possible, which we recognize how lucky she is to be able to do that. Um, but the funds are running dry very quickly. She has a GoFundMe that I know I sent you the link for, and I would just love, every little bit matters. $5, $10. If we can get donations, if we can help with that, I promise that I'll continue to yell as loud as I can for everybody else. So long as I have breath in me. So yeah, that's the last thing I have to say for that.
We have some generous people, some generous viewers, and when we clip this and share it, it'll get seen by hundreds, thousands more people. So we hope that we can help you guys out, because we know that you're
Thank you.
fighting and we know that you're in the trenches and the front lines. Mike Hoffman, U.S. Marine, combat war veteran, and friend of somebody right now detained in the immigration quagmire. I don't know what we call this. This is just a heartbreaking situation, and sometimes feels hopeless. But today you gave us some hope, man. So I really appreciate you being positive despite the circumstances that your friend's in. Thanks, Mike, so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, God bless you, brother. Thank you for your service. Free Carlos, man. I love that. Yes, you're right, Jesse. We'll let you drop off, and we'll get to our next guest here. Our next guest is we're going to pivot away a little bit. We were talking a lot about Alligator Alcatraz, folks in detention. Given that this is the start of Hispanic Heritage Month, yesterday, September 15th, it goes till October 15th. We had El Grito last night. First grito in history done by a Mexican president there in Mexico, which was so chilling to see, man. It was so cool to see her out there and giving a grito. I debated on whether or not I was going to do my own grito. I'm not going to do it. If you're the homie, maybe I'll do it for you later. Let me get free Carlos for that. I love you guys' engagement here. Let me get Barney here going. And we'll talk to him about being a small business owner here, being a Latino small business owner, Barney Santos. And he's out of Los Angeles. And some of that was introduced to me by a mutual friend. And we'll talk all about that right now as we wait for Barney to show up. That was really great. I loved Mike Hoffman. Mike was just a terrific guest with us last week when we met him. We met him because of Alligator Alcatraz, and now we're meeting somebody. Also, dang, you look so cool, man. You look cooler online than I thought you would.
I don't know.
I love.
I don't know what to think of that. But thank
I
you.
love the LA, the LA button to the top. I do the same. I'm all
Yeah.
about that. You're bringing me back home, bro. I love that. Barney,
That's
what's
cool.
going on,
Thank you.
brother?
So thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, it's yeah, it's been a big year, so it's a lot going on. But thank you for bringing us on, and Hispanic Heritage Month. It's kick off a great month for us.
That's right. We wanted to highlight what often is called the backbone of America as the small business owners. And we all know, the people that are watching, the people that follow us know that Latinos lead that entrepreneurial spirit, that entrepreneurial vision. I was really drawn to who you are because of what happened earlier this summer in Los Angeles. And so I want to start there and sort of get you to introduce yourself, but also I'm really interested in how what happened in LA in those first weeks with the militarization of the streets impacted and influenced what you're doing today and now.
Yeah, I mean, LA, we kind of joke amongst ourselves that LA's been a story this year of kind of like fire and ice, right? And we bookend both ends with that. And beginning of the year was so bad, and that was really shook a lot of people, impacted business in a big way. And then you have these ice rays that kind of it really transcended here in this epicenter of I guess it's really the southeast Los Angeles, East Los Angeles area. That's really kind of where it took hold initially. You had cities like Montebello, like Downey, like Bell, Pico Rivera, East LA, Boyle Heights. It really kind of was a strong presence. And it was really difficult. Honestly, I didn't quite understand what was happening or the impact until afterward, right? Because you're
So
kind of you're kind of in the middle of it, dealing with it. I mean, there were times where literally I was you getting calls from like a council member or a local leader from the community calling me, "Hey, we reported some unmarked vehicles on the street. Can you go check them out?" To see, and I'm literally driving up and down the block in our downtown looking for these cars because people are trying to identify them and then chase them out. And I'm driving up and down the street and thinking to myself, like, I can't believe this is what the life that we live now, and this is what it's come to. Trying to protect employees, trying to protect people in the community. Like it was an absolute. It was bizarre. It really was truly bizarre.
you became part of some of these, we call them like these community or civil defense groups that pop up and sort of, you know, alert the community of what is going on, right? And the militarization. What was that like to see the streets that you grew up on, the same streets that you have created all these like great, wonderful memories, right? These like life shaping memories. And now, like what we saw this summer and still continuing today. I mean, we just saw a raid yesterday in Van Nuys where agents, suspected federal agents, literally went inside of a Home Depot and took people into custody.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I can't reiterate that enough. It was just, it felt like a different timeline. It just felt like some sort of strange movie we were watching because you know, it was happening so often, and like most things that this administration does, it was sort of back to back, really aggressive in the beginning, and it just felt like it was nonstop. And so the only thing people could do is, informally organize, to kind of like watch each other's backs, um, do protests. There was a time where people were finding out where the ICE agents were staying in their hotels. People were going out and doing, protesting the hotels and letting them know that we were there, making noise. And so, everybody felt like, well, if you're antagonizing and you're instigating and you're causing havoc within our communities, then the least that people could do is, antagonize you while you sleep. That was kind of like the idea behind it. And so, people I think underestimate how much of a psychological warfare that was in our communities. Like, you know, we had literally people, if you didn't recognize somebody in your business, everyone was like, well, who's that? What's going on there? There were people coming into our restaurant and our food hall who were just sitting in our courtyard, and they wouldn't buy anything. And, they looked like somebody from Texas or something like that. And they were just sitting in the corner looking at people. And you would see them in the camera and you're like, well, what are they doing? They're sitting there for like 15 minutes. They just get up and then leave.
You know what they're
It's
doing.
Of course, yeah, of course. We can definitely allude to that, and I think that was the reason why we were so vigilant. It was such a weird time. Honestly, I can't. There's no other way that I can describe. It was, and for me, being able to look at a lot of the people who work at our place. Thankfully, they're all documented, but a lot of them, even though they were documented and they had a residency card or they were DACA students or whatever, they were still scared because they just were like, well, we don't know if that even applies in today's environment. Like, in Montebello, there was that case. I don't know if that was the first case where somebody got arrested that was actually a citizen, right? And they were
Yeah.
detained, and that was like the first one. So if that happened to a citizen he was from here, that's why everybody else was like, well, it could happen to anybody, even if you're a resident. So
So let me ask you this, of how you dealt with, or how you still deal with now, the fear of retaliation or retribution, because in that same vein, the Huntington Park house that got exploded, right? They were going after somebody who they thought was interfering with a federal operation, and how they define interfering with a federal operation is becoming more and more lax. So for someone like you, this is sort of a rhetorical question because I remember posting about ICE being in my community. I'm from Eagle Rock. I saw ICE there, or I got a tip that they were there, and I posted, and I got people on social media saying that they were going to turn me in, that I was violating some federal law, and that and then there was a split second where I was like, holy shit, am I breaking the law here? Am I doing something wrong? I wasn't. I'm not. But like, how do you, as somebody who was in the middle of it, somebody still connected so much and plugged in, deal with that fear?
I yeah, for me, it's I don't really I don't consider that fear, to be honest with you. Just, whatever happens, I feel like I don't know. I guess I feel not as in danger as, a lot of the most vulnerable population is.
Right.
I worry more about them and their well-being and what they're going to do, because I know a lot of times you get people who feel antagonized, and so as a defense mechanism, you're going to try to retaliate or somehow, go against. And so that
Yeah.
I worry about the community, because, who knows? I would hate to see somebody I know or someone in the community that is part of our groups or a friend of a friend be impacted in a way. So I know people for a while. You got to understand, for 2 months, right? Like, it was really kind of a havoc. And for 2 months, it impacted. I mean, we own a restaurant. Obviously, it impacted our business. It impacted everybody's business. It was such a hard time for small businesses as a whole. So, people are still recovering from that and not fully recovered from that yet. So this was just a chaotic time for everybody.
I think that that's something that I want you to speak on, because I've seen kind of numbers floated around the $3.2 trillion economic buying power of Latinos. I know that I saw reports early on of places out of Houston, Texas, where we weren't seeing the volume of raids recorded. Maybe they were numbers wise, but we certainly weren't seeing the images that we saw in LA. But I remember some local officials speaking up there and saying, God, it's been a disastrous impact to the economy. I remember going to, we were just in Utah last month, where in some of those flea markets and swap meets, I mean, they're all hanging on by a thread. Some of them are already closed. They said they were closing at the end of the month. What has been the anecdotal or real life impact? What are the numbers in terms of the impact that these raids have had on small businesses in the Southland?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's no way that I would know specifics. I know Supervisor Hilda Solis for District 1, she put together this sort of initiative to kind of gather what that could look like economically. I think they put together, I mean, they put funding towards it for sure, and they started trying to figure out what that actual impact would be, because you're talking about loss of wages because people weren't working or working less hours. You have those people who weren't spending. You have customers who weren't coming out. So it's like it's a whole cycle of different businesses impacted, right? In different fronts. So
It's all these different elements of the
yeah,
ecosystem that are impacted.
yeah. It's people don't understand, like, the intersectionality of all that, right? Like how deep that rabbit hole goes. The economic power of Latinos in the community. And like I said, it wasn't just undocumented. It was documented people who were also scared. People who just didn't want to know what's going on, so they didn't want to be outside. I mean, we saw a ton of that. We saw a ton of that everywhere.
And you know what I think about? I think about those images that we saw in those early days of the senora pouring horchata into the eyes
Right.
of the tear gas sheriff's deputies, and even in the face of this extraordinary trauma and fear and chaos and uncertainty about themselves, that they're helping out, the other side, so to speak. Right. That it was a real human moment, man. So like, help me understand that, because you're living in the mix. I go back and forth. What do you cling on to, and, to make things more human, the humanity here? Because we have gone through such a summer madness of 2025, man. It's whether or not people accept it or not. We are being profiled for the color of our skin. Punto. End stop, full stop, end of sentence. No debate. How do you deal with that as a Latino?
That is the question, right? I mean, I think a lot of times, I talk to my friends about this too, and I think a lot of people it's hard. You disassociate to a certain degree, right? You kind of normalize it, which is sad, because it's just like, what else do you do, right? I think you can run towards some sort of community building and feel connected to other people, which is kind of what we did. as a
Yep.
byproduct of everything, we started hosting art events so that community could come out and like express themselves creatively through art, poetry, journaling. We designed a shirt to raise money. We raised about like almost $8,000 and donated that to Inclusive Action to the city for their street vendor fund. So I think for us, when we are in the face to face with those moments, we tend to turn more towards the community and turn to action versus other things. We also help organize a protest in front of our location.
Yeah.
I think some of the things that we can feel like, okay, well, we feel like we're part of this organizing on the ground, on the boots on the ground to make some sort of impact. But not everybody has that liberty. So a lot of people that I know were actually hiding out in their house for weeks.
I was going to say, some people are scared of that community,
Yeah,
Barney. Some people are literally actively and intentionally avoiding that community for fear of being at the carne asada where their uncle is on the list of being detained. And then all of a sudden, oops, hey, you're caught up. And like you said, whether you're a citizen or not, it's almost like we're going to grab you, reasonable suspicion. We'll figure it out later in the system. And maybe that'll be sorted out in a couple of days. Maybe it won't. Who knows? But it's okay. This is the casualty and sort of collateral damage of us just doing our jobs here of law and order, right? I mean, that's the fucked up part to me, is that the very thing that I turn to, just like you, of going with our gente, with our people, of leaning in and going to the Mexican restaurant, or spending more time with people that just like look like me or who are allies. Now all of a sudden, I legitimately have to fear that that is a element of probable cause for a suspected ICE agent, a bounty hunter, or whatever to go after my ass because they feel like it.
yeah.
Like that's
And
hard.
it's sad. It's sad because look, I mean, I get whatever the idea behind being tough on immigration is one thing. What's happening is more than that, right? It is sort of this psychological warfare that's being carried out in our streets, and the collateral damage is our Latino people, right?
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are being impacted psychologically by this. And it's you see the residual impact still to this day, even though things have slowed down. You keep hearing news about, what's going on, how they're getting funded. I mean, if you turn on to Univision's Televisa, you see commercials of ICE like advertising for jobs, right? So it's even in our televisions, like in our communities. And so it's everywhere. And so I think what we do in the face of this is just try to be positive, try to build community, try to give people an outlet, because people sometimes just want a place where they can just forget about what's going on and just turn into their family, their friends, and just vibe out, maybe listen to music, whatever. But it's been
I
tough,
love
man.
that, man. Just vibe out. That's the
Yeah.
remedy. It's like having conversations like this, man. It's like I will. I was. I know that was such a way to like join and hop on a live. It's like, oh, you look so cool, but literally, you remind me of home, Barney. Like looking at you and seeing you, and I'm like, oh man, I live in Atlanta, in a place where it's hard to see someone that looks like me or somebody that sort of is like me, like-minded, and then when I look at you and it's just like, oh, this is home. So having this makes me feel good, right? This fills my cup, connecting with others that are like-minded, hosting platforms, highlighting small business owners, people that are really out there doing stuff. So
Yeah.
like tell me about what you do, because like we kind of went in really straight away. Tell people about your background and your business, man.
Yeah, so, I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 18, 19 years old. I'm now 42. We own a food hall in Montebello. I mean, we really own a development company that we're trying to sort of invest in Latino communities to help focus on investing in transformative projects that kind of really build up the local economies. Our first project is Boulevard Market, which is in East LA. Thankfully, we've been doing really well with that. We've been open 4 years this past August. We won one of LA Times best Latino businesses in LA. And so it's been great.
Congratulations, man.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So we have that. We have our bar, Alchemy Craft, that also was on that list, so and we're looking at expanding, growing new projects. But essentially what we do is we try our best to be authentically aligned with the communities that we're trying to serve and build deep roots so that people can have this sort of connection to each other. I think what we lack in LA for sure is that sense of like walkability that like you see in Europe, you see in DC and New York and like I mean not Texas, like Tokyo, places that are really dense have where like you can walk, like serendipitously bump into someone
Yeah.
you haven't seen in 20 years just by walking on the street going to buy some fruit. Like that is what we're trying to do in our communities, and that's the ethos of our company. And so we're trying to invest in projects that do that. And Boulevard Market has been one of those important things that we've been working on to kind of dial in our business model and making sure that our programming is tight. And thankfully it's been working out. But it's been tough this year. This year specifically has been, I feel like more than any other year has been a fight. Last year was about the economy, right? Because we saw the residual impacts of inflation, all that stuff was happening. And then this year it's been mostly, again, the story of fire and ice. Fire was a huge impact this year. You had the ice raids that were a huge impact, and people are just, the cost of living is really high. So all that stuff is impacting us as a whole. I always say hospitality is kind of like a canary in the coal mine. It's the first place that people tighten their belts and say, I'm not going to spend on that extra luxury food item this week because I comí en la casa, like we say, right? Or
Yeah, I comí en la casa.
right,
I McDonald's in la casa.
right. So we're the first to feel that, and so I think that is what's been happening. This last year, we definitely felt it. We recovered a little bit this year, but then those impacts of the fires in LA and now the ice raids in LA, and who knows what's coming up next. But I feel like this year's been like just a roller coaster. And California isn't making it easier, right? The policies are really kind of anti-small business. It's been really bizarre to watch some of our politicians kind of come and take the formal photo op with the small business, but then behind closed doors, like vote for policy that helps close their doors. I mean, LA is closing a lot of institutional restaurants this year.
I mean, and you've survived, and shout out to you. But like, the remedy and the anecdote all of a sudden isn't going and swinging the pendulum the other way, right? Like it was a very tough, fought out mayoral race between Rick Caruso and Karen Bass. And Karen Bass has she's stepped in it several times this year. But, Caruso has now stepped in and sort of positioned himself as some sort of savior, this anti-Bass, but like he comes with his own set of garbage. This idea that he's going to allow Trump and stand up to Trump. No, he's not. No one's standing up to Trump right now. Nobody. Karen Bass got dragged because she represents everything Trump hates, which is a strong Black woman. And then I'm sure there's people here that think, oh, she's not educated or whatever. She makes gaffes. Like, she represents something, and LA represents something to the Trump administration that they clearly went after and wanted to and were salivating to get their hands on, right?
Yeah.
They
The
knew
Trump
that what they
administration,
would do there was going to be a testing ground for, their hate, their cruelty. Barney, our next guest has joined us here, Pablo Manriquez. We're going to have 5 good minutes with him. But before we let you go, anything that you want to say that we haven't asked you that you think is important to know? Anything that you'd like to talk about, man? Now's your chance.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, if you're in the East Side area of Los Angeles or just in LA in general, you want to stop by, hang out, and vibe out with us, and join the community. Come check out Boulevard Market. We're here in the city of Montebello, and yeah, man, we have a good time here. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're encouraging the community to slow down, make it walkable, look around. I love that, man. We're so busy in our cars in LA. It's like the freeways get us to point A to point B. Take it easy, man. Vibe out. I love that. Barney,
I would say less social, more social, right? That's kind of that thing that you want to do. Yeah.
Come back and join us, man. You're welcome on the show anytime. Thanks, Barney, so much. All right. That was Barney Santos, small business owner, original homie from East LA. Good dude, man. I just met him for the first time. You guys all met him with me here. And we'll have him drop off here. Can we just do that? Remove. There we go. There we go. All right. And now, without further ado, I love having Pablo Manriquez on, editor at the Migrant Insider. I love his energy. I love his spirit. I love his attitude. Man, he brings it. And so I thought we'd end the show today with 5 good minutes with Pablo and figure out what's going in Washington today, see what the latest is, what he's covering, what he's up to, what he's working on, see where he's at in Washington, D.C. Sometimes he's in the Capitol. Sometimes he's in the subway. Sometimes he's maybe in the art studio. You never know with Pablo, but we have had a great show so far today. We heard earlier, while we wait for Pablo to join, we heard earlier from Mike Hoffman, former U.S. Marine, combat military veteran, who also currently has a friend in immigration detention, somebody who spent some time in Alligator Alcatraz. We also, oh no, okay, my internet connection sucks. There's like a storm in DC or something, and it's making the internet connection terrible. Every time we want to join Pablo, we gotta figure it out. Maybe we need to do a better job at planning here. Um, Pablo's also always on the move, so I never want to like lock him down and say, Pablo, you got to be here at 3:55 or three. He's following bills, he's following legislation, he's chasing AOC around, he's on the Capitol steps, he's at the White House, he's everywhere, man. He's everywhere in Washington D.C. and apparently he's not near anywhere that has good internet connection. So, well, so it goes. So it goes. We'll cancel that request. He's our political butterfly. He is. He really is our political butterfly. This handkerchief's for showing, not for blowing. So, guys, what a show. Thank you guys so much for all of you. And as we close out this show, I wanted to take a moment to talk to you guys about some exciting news. Earlier today, I had a wonderful conversation with the folks over at the Pew Research Center. And earlier, I guess yesterday, late last night, yesterday they reached out to us and they want us to attend, and they're inviting us to do and be a part of the inaugural New Media Summit in Washington, D.C. In the first week of November. So we're heading to Washington, D.C. We'll be there. We're going to be part of a small, hand-selected group of the nation's top content creators, and they want to hear from us. They want to know why this has been so successful, why you guys are watching, and why you guys are part of this. It's a little intimidating because among those that are going to attend and who already have committed, all of them have over 1 million followers. I don't want to put any of them on blast right now. I want them to announce their own thing. But if you are a fan of this independent media space, you have certainly heard of some of the individuals who are going to attend this media summit in the first week of November. We're so thrilled and we're so excited to be part of this. I was telling the folks at the Pew Research Center just how grateful we were of being honored and recognized, and they feel like our voice matters. This brings me to our next point. I really do feel like our voice matters. And after the incident of political violence this last week in this country with the assassination of Charlie Kirk, it has been more and more clear to me just how important independent media is. I want to be clear about this. Murder is wrong. Killing is wrong. Full stop. There's no and or but on the back end of that statement. What I will say, though, is what is also wrong is firing people for literally posting the same words of that individual, literally, in a comment section. One of the Washington Post reporters is among the many firings of people that have been let go and targeted because of their criticism of this man. Let this man rest in peace. Let's not say his name. Let's not speak about him. Let's not disturb him. If that's what it really takes for us not to be singled out as the ones filled with hate. I have no hate in my heart. And there's some days where I'm more spiritually fit than others. And there's some days like right now in this moment where I really do want to lead with love and tolerance and encourage you guys all to not engage with the hate, to avoid those confrontations, to not feel like you're the one that needs to call somebody out right now. There's so much that we're already dealing with as individuals in this world that sometimes it is important for us to just pause and look at what our feet are doing and be grateful for the life that we have. That's what I try to do every morning with my daughter from 7:42 to 7:50 as we sit and wait for the bell to ring for school. I get to do something that I would never have been allowed to do if I was still at CNN, because I would be rushing to the bureau to start my day. And instead, I get to stay and be fully present with my daughter. So in this moment of chaos and uncertainty, in this moment where the world can feel so heavy, where sometimes the cloud of melancholy even follows me, it is important for me to remind myself of all the things that I'm grateful for in this life, of just how significantly worse it could be for me, and not to feel sorry for myself. You guys have taught me that. You guys have given me the confidence and strength to know that what we're doing here matters. And we had just yet another affirmation with the Pew Research Center reaching out and saying that they want us to be part of this new project that they're working on. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. Compassion and empathy is key. Compassion and empathy. That's what we're about here. Make truth go viral. Thanks everybody for watching. That was the latest edition of Nick Valencia News.